In this video, I'm going to show you the exact workflow my AI agent uses to manage my Gmail with 100% reliability. Right now, most people are just dumping data and tools into an agent and hoping for the best. Maybe people are using OpenClaw, plugging in a few skills, and just letting the agent try and figure out how to do it. This approach can work some of the time, but if we actually want reliability, then we need to start thinking differently. The problem is that responding to an email is actually a bunch of different processes. The response depends on who the person is, what they're asking, and like a dozen other variables. So the right way to approach this is to use a plain language agentic workflow like this one. Let me just give you a quick overview of how this works. So first of all, I have my connection to Gmail as well as Shopify for this example, and I can use those connections with my workflow. So for instance, here are all of the triggers that Gmail offers, and my workflow is set up so that every time I receive a message through Gmail, it's going to run this workflow. So here I have a few inputs, and if I were to run this workflow manually, then I would have to put these in myself through the form here. But because it's actually going to be run by this trigger, I don't have to do that. The information for these will be inferred from the data that I receive from Gmail. Now once it starts running this, it's going to see that we're making a contextual choice based on the purpose of the email. Alright, so if the email is spam or otherwise it's trying to sell me something, archive it. And in this case, don't even notify me, just do it. I'm giving it this one caveat that if it's an email that I've already responded to, then it's not spam. On the other hand, if the email is asking for a refund, we want to run this workflow. So I'm telling it to run the workflow within the workflow. And friends, this is one of the biggest secrets in engineering. We can let a workflow be small because we're breaking it down into separate workflows. Now, on the other hand, if the email is asking for support, then we would want to run the troubleshooting workflow. Now, this is just a simplified example. There's probably a lot of other kinds of emails that you would get to. But for now, let's take a look at the refund sender. So if I click through, it takes me to a new workflow. This workflow is slightly more complex, but still small. You'll notice I have the exact same inputs. So basically it's going to carry those over from the other workflow. We also have this read first header here, because if we're going to expect our agent to know how to handle refunds, we need to give it a refund policy. And again, these are examples. You're going to want to do this for real when you do it. So back to our refund sender workflow. There's a few more things going on here. We're going to skip over this template for now and come back to it in a second. So we've got a few more steps here. And now we're breaking down what to do based on whether the request is allowed by our refund policy. Now I'll break down how this works more in a future video, but ultimately when we run this, we're not just going to trust the agent to do this on its own, at least not just yet. So we're giving it this proposal template so that before it does anything, it's going to submit a proposal that looks something like this. The proposal will have the email information. It's going to give us a recommendation, basically whether it thinks we should give this person a refund or not. And it's going to write out a response. Now, once we get this proposal, we'll actually be able to make changes to this response. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. And then finally, we have some checkboxes that'll let us decide whether or not we want it to move forward. All right, so once it submits this proposal, the workflow is going to actually pause right there. That'll happen automatically with the system. But we also have this line here, just in case it tries to skip. All right, then the rest of this just talks about actually approving the refund. Cool, so let's jump back. And let's see what happens if the email asks for support. So it's going to run this new workflow troubleshooting. And here, once again, we see our inputs. And again, we have our read first section. We have a couple of different documents in here. One of them is this Aidolons information. So this is just information about my company, Aidolons. So if I look in here, this is just a document that contains a bunch of information about Aidolons. Now listen, what I want to say about documents like these, you have to treat these as sacred. Okay, I know it's long, it's a lot of work to have to go through all this, but every response that this agent gives is going to be based on words from this document. So if there's something in here that I don't know about, then it will probably come back to bite me at some point in the future. All right, so back to our workflow. You'll notice that this one has two separate templates, and you'll see why in a second. So it starts out kind of the same as our refund, but now instead of actually doing a refund, it's just going to come up with an answer based on our source documents that we gave up here. And by the way, this troubleshooting document is empty right now, and I'm going to show you why in a second. All right, so what we're telling it down here is that if a question is covered in the source documents, then we're going to give it this template. then we want it to write a proposal based on this template right here. But if the question is not covered in the source materials, then we have an answer for that too. We still want the agent to use the proposal tool, but this time it's just going to ask the user for an answer. And that's actually what this second template is for here. Because you see, if we only gave it the one template, then it's going to write everything to look like this. But here we're basically giving it permission to not know. And when it has permission to not have the answer, then it's not going to make up some random stuff. So it's going to send this proposal and it's just going to give you the space to write an answer. And this is actually really powerful. Once the user responds, it's going to take whatever that response is and it's going to add it to this troubleshooting guide, which means that the system actually learns over time. But again, this isn't something where the agent is just choosing when to write its memories and what to write. We're being really specific here, and we're making it so that everything that goes into this troubleshooting document is originally sourced from us. So let's see what this actually looks like when we run it. Here I am back in the original workflow, and I'm actually going to hop over to Gmail, and here I'm just going to send to this test account, and we'll say, question about proposal system. And I'll just pretend to be a person with a question. How does a proposal system work? And I'll send this and hop back over. All right, and the workflow has started. And you can see a workflow is really just a chat. Okay, and here's the proposal that it sent me. And it gives me the email that it was sent from, as well as the actual email body. And because it had the proper source materials, this is actually a pretty good answer. So I'm going to go ahead and click to accept. All right, and the run succeeded. It responded to the sender, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. So that's the gist of it. And like I said, in future videos, I'm going to break this down in a lot more detail and explain exactly how all of this works and why, so that you can see exactly how to develop these 100% reliable systems using nothing but plain language. So thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.